sometimes you have to hit the bottom to recognize what's on the other side. And you have to go through those challenges to understand like, oh, I deserve a lot better than this. And to get the motivation to say, okay, no, I'm ready to make the choice to be happy.
I'm Elysia Skye, and this is the Brilliance Method podcast. Through mindful, motivational, and often hilarious conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives, you'll discover new ways to create your life on purpose. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Brilliance Method. Today we are hanging out with one of my nearest and dearest, Crystal Gans, who I love so much. She is the founder and artist manager at Mind Our Music, which is an artist-first, hands-on approach to developing and managing talent. She's my husband's manager, so I'm a little bit biased, but her and I have a long history, which we'll get into today. She's also the VP of Business Development for Multi-Market Partnerships at iHeartMedia. And with 17 years of experience in marketing and advertising, and she has a strong passion for music, events, and digital platforms, Crystal successfully leads a media sales organization to create integrated marketing opportunities that get results for both local and national brands. So she's got a big girl job and she's a boss-ass babe. And I am so excited that she is here. Hi, darling.
Hello there.
It's so fun just like hanging out with one of your best friends, right?
I know. And I love that we're both repping Pearl Jam. You've got Pearl Jam and I've got Eddie Vedder right up there.
He's just sitting on your shoulder like an angel, singing deeply into your old gaming headphones that I forced you to wear today.
Always.
Oh my gosh. So I wanted to bring you on the show because you do have a full-time career and you love your career. And I know how much you love your job and everything that you do. And I've toured with you enough and spent enough time with you to see how hard you work. And what's so phenomenal about you and your energy, and besides for myself, you're one of the only people who I've met or it's like, how do you do it all? There's a lot of people listening who have a career that they love, that they're passionate about, like you are with iHeart, and they also have other passions. And some people feel like, you know, it's all or nothing. Okay, I'm going to do my job, right? Or my day job or whatever it is. But, you know, then I don't have time to write my book, or I don't have time to learn to play piano, or, you know, I've always wanted to have an Etsy store and sell my jewelry, but I don't have time, right? And I have this conversation with a lot of friends and clients about the language we use when we say, I don't have time, because I believe everything is a choice. And you have navigated this theory of, I can create time if I want to build what it is I want my life to look like. And it's amazing.
Thank you. Well, somebody once told me everything that you just said, and oh, that was you. So I was definitely that person that didn't believe that this could ever happen. And I got stuck in that rut for a while. So I cannot agree more that it is absolutely a choice. And when you find that thing that drives you and motivates you and that you're passionate about, and I've been blessed enough to kind of have, I always tell people like, I lead two lives and I love both of them, which is really, really cool. And it wasn't always that way. And we can get into that. But when you kind of have that aha moment, and let me tell you, it's really hard to get there because it's just so easy to focus on all the things that we're not doing and that we're not getting to and that we're, you know, not living in our purpose. And the hardest thing in life is figuring out what that purpose is. But when you do kind of have that flip of a switch where it's, oh, I do have a choice and I can make time for this. And don't get me wrong, I still literally yesterday was texting somebody, why aren't there more hours in the day? I wish there were two of me. Like, we're always going to want that. We're always going to want more, but that's the exhilarating part of it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you're so great at, you know, even before iHeart, when you were with the other company you were at, was mentoring and, you know, really managing talent. And when I say talent, for people who are listening or watching, that also means employees, right? And when you are a great manager, delegator, and leader, then you know how to ask for support and receive that support. And that's a learning curve for everyone. So where did that come from? Did you witness things like crashing and burning in previous careers were like, wow, if I don't learn how to delegate or, you know, maybe it wasn't even you, but where does that come from? That power to ask for help?
There's a lot of layers to that. I mean, I think definitely when I first got into this career, and I mean, part of this is you don't have the experience, and when we're starting out, and I hate to bring age into it, but when you're young and just kind of figuring it out, and you might not necessarily, unless you're really born with that confidence, it can take you a minute to get the life experiences necessary sometimes to figure out exactly what you want and what to ask for. So I think that was definitely part of it. But, you know, for me, I think the biggest moment that made me a better mentor was for a little while there not being around the type of leadership that I needed. And so as I kind of elevated through the ranks and realized, we all have that teacher that we remember growing up, right? We have plenty of teachers that we've had that we either have no recollection of or ones that we remember for the wrong reasons, but we all probably have that one or two teachers that just stood out. And the reasons that they stood out is the same reason why in leadership too, right? That when you have a great manager or a leader, they really, really stand out. And when you have the opposite of that, that certainly stands out too. And it's really true that, people largely don't leave a company, they leave their leader or they leave the management because they don't consider that manager a leader. So, I guess I always just thought of, as we get more experienced or as we get older, you look back and realize, wow, I have the ability to truly impact somebody's life, whether that's as a teacher, as a manager, as a leader. You have the ability to make or break someone's day. And when you truly understand that you have that power, some people take that and run with it in the wrong direction, and it's a power trip, and we've all had that. Goes into the negative experiences with bad leadership. But then for the ones that truly understand, wow, okay, you know what can I do within my power to mentor this person and prepare them for whatever is next in their life, and to have some sort of experience that they remember for years to come. I think that's what ultimately made me even enjoy what I was doing in a previous life. And it truly did transition into building the confidence of, oh, I've always wanted to be an artist manager and develop that kind of talent. I'm already doing that with sales and marketing and advertising, mentorships. How much of this can transition? Because at the end of the day, it's coaching people. It's motivating and inspiring people and figuring out what is going to bring out the best in them. And I'm lucky enough to have a few people in my life that have done that for me, whether it be leaders in corporate America or friends who have been a leader or a beacon that I looked up to and that I learned from, other artist managers that, I learned what to do and what maybe not to do. Because the other side of that is there's a lesson in the leaders that might not have been on your radar for the right reasons. You learn from that too. And a lot of times that also, you understand what you don't want to be. And sometimes that can be even more powerful.
100%. In the coaching industry, there's a lot of coaches that take advantage of people and are not honest. And, in going through so many different coaching programs, it helped me become not just a better coach, but a better business coach and a better leader. Because I'm like, yeah, I want to do this better. I want to take my own version of my own brilliance and do it better. And to your point, the coolest, most innovative inventions come from people seeing a gap in what is available and going, I want this, right? So that's what you did. You said, I want to do this, but I want it to be like this. And this piece is missing. And so you, for a lack of a better word, channeled what it is that you wanted to bring to the table as a leader. And I really love, and I've never heard it put this way before, but I love what you said about managing artists and how you built that skill managing talent in corporate and, being married to a wild and crazy artist. Like, for those of you who haven't heard his music or seen him, he's brilliant in every way. A little bit of Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, and then a little bit like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. He's got like those wild sides, and then the groundedness of someone like Mozart. That's my husband. That's my pitch, by the way. That was pretty good. But
that was pretty good.
When you have someone like that, they need management. They need somebody to see where they can shine. And it's really cool because a lot of people think of talent managers or artist managers or even acting managers as someone who, just knows how to navigate the industry. And that part is true too. And it's so incredibly valuable that you do have all that experience and you've spent time with amazing artists and bands growing up. But to know how to help people get out of their own way is a skill that most managers probably don't appreciate as one of the most important things.
Oh yeah. And look, there's a lot that it's funny because everything happens for a reason. And there are a lot of resources and tools that I had or have in corporate America that prepared me for that people management, right? So the everything from, the Berkman or the DISC or all these, personality tests, and they're all so incredibly impactful because it really all boils down to you can't have a one size fits all approach to leading people or to coaching people. You have to be able to understand what makes them tick, yes, what motivates them, but also just like how to make them feel seen. And that's different for everybody. It's an individualized approach for sure. And, when you're transitioning that into an artist management conversation and talent in that regard, you've got creatives that the genius is sometimes untethered, right? It's hard to navigate that. And you use the perfect analogy, and I love that you brought up Brian Wilson and Doc Brown.
Brian Wilson, Doc Brown, Mozart.
And then imagine trying to motivate or manage that or to help somebody like that get organized or feel seen. It's really interesting, and knowing how to identify what's going to connect with that person is definitely part of it.
You're dealing with people's egos and they're fragile. And even people coming up in corporate, but especially artists, they're putting their heart and soul on the line. And so how do you walk that line between, hey, this is what you need to do, and by the way, I know you're going to be uncomfortable doing it?
So yes, understanding the personality and using all of those tools that might be at your disposal, and really just, you said something earlier that resonated with me, which is, a lot of people think that like talent agents and managers and et cetera are just good at navigating the business. And yeah, that you're right. That is a big part of it, networking and knowing the right people and connecting the dots and being able to see paths that sometimes a lot of other people might not see. Like there's definitely a talent in that. And I'm going to use something that's either going to age me depending on who listens to this or resonate with everybody, but you referenced Back to the Future, so I'll go there. So
yes.
Jerry Maguire, right?
Mm-hmm.
The moment in Jerry Maguire when he is hugging, what's his face that I of course can't remember his name now. But
Cuba?
Anyway, what's that?
Cuba?
Yeah, Cuba Gooding Jr. I mean, I was trying to remember the character's name, but you know what I mean. When Tom Cruise is hugging Cuba Gooding Jr. But when they have this moment when there's this scene after the game in the locker room, whatever, in the hallway, and they are embracing and they are so deeply in love.
Mm-hmm.
And you see another agent with his client go, why don't we have that relationship? And that has always resonated with me because what goes beyond knowing how to navigate and, the business, right? You have to, the people that are just in it for the fame or the money they lose sight of, you should only be doing it with people that you really are passionate about and love. Because if you're not in it for truly wanting to be in it with that person or with that talent or with that music that they're creating, and there's always going to be, of course, there's days that I might want to kill your husband, but there's,
okay, me too.
That really is something that just, I think most people forget about. It's so easy to apply that to any aspect of in life. When you forget about the why did you get into it with that person? Why did you start, why did you hire that person? If we're talking about corporate America, why did you start managing that talent? And hopefully it came from a place of you truly believe and love that individual or that act. And so, yeah, it's kind of cheesy, but that epiphany came to me not too long ago. And I was like, it's the Jerry Maguire moment. It's why don't we have that kind of relationship? Because that is what takes it above and beyond. So 100%. To take it all the way back to the beginning of like, how do people do this and navigate two jobs or start this side project, or it's a lot easier when you know that it's something that is filling your purpose. It doesn't feel like work anymore.
Yeah. And then bringing in that personal relationship, like you just said, like just loving someone and rooting for them. And you've always been such a champion and a cheerleader for people to shine. I remember when you were still like like solely on the radio side. And you reached out to me and you're like, we're doing this breast cancer thing. Can you like record a commercial? We're going to get a bunch of money and donate it to your cause. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like you just thought of me on your own because you wanted to help and shine a light. And that's just who you are. And it makes so much sense that you are on the path that you're on. And I love you. And thank you for being that human.
I love you too.
And, going back to what you said about you sometimes learn from leadership what you don't want to do. I had a coach. She gave some pretty shitty advice to her clients, which in my opinion, what she said was, if you want to scale your business, you can't like all of your clients. And
Wrong.
I argued with her and I said, I wholeheartedly disagree. I believe if you want to scale your business, like there's people who have email marketing campaigns and they have hundreds of thousands of clients and they don't know who those people are, right? So fine. Maybe they don't like those people because they don't necessarily know who they are, but they should have gratitude for all those individual beings. And therefore that creates some sort of connection of appreciation and like, if you want to call it that way. But what I realize is when people give us bad advice like that, it's because there's something going on with them where they feel like, well, either I don't like people or I'm not likable, or, if you're a yeller in your business and you yell at people, then you have no problem getting yelled at or whatever it is, and we teach people how to treat us. And when I was given that guidance that if you want to scale, because I at the time had a $10,000 a year program, and I tend to be so in it, so in it the way you are with your clients, so in it with my clients. I know their business. I know about their relationships. I know their hopes and their dreams. I think about them when I'm not with them. I send them leads on things when I'm not with them. And yeah, there's no way I could do that with 1,000 people, right? So I understand the point she was making, but that's not the life I want to live. I don't want to have thousands of clients that I potentially don't like, right? That are posting things in my groups that are not in alignment with what I think and feel and support. I want to attract kind people, generous people, loyal people. And as long as I know that they have those qualities, and creative people and people who trust their intuition or want to, then it's okay if I don't know them that well. I'm not going to dislike them unless they're just fucking rude.
Yep. And it's a big lesson to learn. And I think that's also why some people get stuck in that rut of, maybe they started doing something that they thought they were passionate about. And at some point they lose their way and then they wonder, why do I no longer love doing this? And I think sometimes it's looking yourself in the mirror and realizing, of course we hear the stories all the time, money doesn't buy happiness. It certainly helps, but money doesn't buy happiness. When you lose your way, and yeah, you could be hugely financially successful, but at some point you realize like, oh, what did I sacrifice to get here? And am I working with a bunch of people that I really normally would not have worked with, that I only took on because I wanted the paycheck? And that doesn't feel great. So ideally, when you're in alignment with what you're looking to do and you're on your that shared vision, and then guess what? It's okay if at some point that shared connection falters or is no longer a fit. That's a lot of lessons learned in the past few years of doing this from the artist management perspective. Oh my God, it's been almost 5 years. I think I started talking to your husband about starting this business, which by the way, Elysia's husband is the catalyst for starting Mind Our Music. It was a late night conversation where we realized our passions were aligning, but a lot of lessons learned over the years of just that. Sometimes it starts off great and you reevaluate, 6 months, a year, however long later, and say, you know what, maybe this isn't a good fit anymore. And having the courage to have that conversation and walk away from, potentially walk away from money and opportunity because it just doesn't sit right anymore before you lose your way and start feeling like, do I even want to do this anymore? And if you're questioning if you even want to do this anymore, it's usually something's out of alignment with someone in that circle.
And what great advice, whether it is your job or your partnership or where you're living or how you're spending your free time, right? Like, let's get radically honest with ourselves and go, why am I doing this? And we can do that every day, whether or not we feel unhappy, right? Every day we can reevaluate and go, why do I do this? And maybe there's gratitude there. And then some days it's like, I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm shifting. And relationships show up right on time and they end right on time, and Andrea Quinn was a big teacher of that for me. And I needed to learn that, and she's still one of my greatest teachers and mentors. That point wasn't about me and her. That point was about me releasing people from my life that no longer felt like it made sense for us to stay together.
Yeah, and guess what? Those people often served a purpose, whether that was a lesson or there was, I'm sure, a beautiful moment at some point. And even if, again, if that fades away or whatever happens, every situation's unique, but there's learning opportunities in all of it. And the universe, or whatever you want to call it, aligns in mysterious ways, because I can point to, and Elysia knows these stories, but I can point to several examples in the last less than 12 months of questioning, God, I wonder why I had to learn that lesson. And then immediately it's almost like a smack in the face. Like, I would get a text or a phone call that somebody that I never would have crossed paths with had I not been in that situation. That might not have been an ideal situation at the time. Had I not been in that situation, I would never have gotten the text that introduced me to a life-changing opportunity with an artist that I currently work with. Like, that never would have happened. Just be open to everything. And, I have a lot I know I mentioned, teachers and leaders and people that kind of stick out in your life. But a big turning point for me was getting a life coach, right? So when I had a life coach, really good timing, February of 2020, who knew? Who knew she would be helping me navigate a really interesting time in all of our lives, in addition to everything else going on. But that was a life-changing aha moment. I was ready for that flip to be switched. I was so stuck in seeing things a certain way and not necessarily the positive, but I was so ready for that guidance, because you have to be ready for it. And then it really was now I'm starting to believe all of this, open to everything, and everything happens for a reason. And you put yourself in the right situations, and you understand who you are and what you want to stand for and what you want to align with, and everything just somehow falls into place.
It's called faith, baby.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so cool. So in addition to your life coach, earlier you had mentioned teachers. Is there a teacher you had growing up that you want to give a shout out or a praise to?
Oh man, I've been lucky to have a few of them. It's funny because there's one, I don't even think you've heard this story. There's one that really stands out, Mrs. Shear. And I think she was like my third or fourth grade teacher. I can't exactly remember what grade, but stood out so much because when all the other teachers were very much like accountability and, no, do this and do it this way. And we can equate this to later in life with leaders too, right? When everything's all about like, hey, you didn't do this thing, right? And she was the opposite. She was very much, embracing and loving and positive reinforcement. And I can't remember exact details, but the fact that I'm talking about a third or fourth grade teacher that at 40 something years old, I'm still talking about, clearly made an impact on how she chose to use that position. And I'm sure that, you're talking about a bunch of, what age are you in third or fourth grade? I don't know, like 9, 10-year-olds, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you, it could be very easy to get fed up and frustrated and lash out, right? I would understand that completely, but she never did.
Wow. And what an important age. When I went to hypnotherapy college, and we learned a lot about the brain from the age of 2 to about 10, we are so impressionable. And that is when we start to create subconscious beliefs around the things that are happening to us. And those subconscious beliefs that we create in that sweet spot, in that, little tiny kid, beautiful brain of ours, are the reason why we respond and react to so much in our adulthood, which is why hypnotherapy is so powerful, because as adults, we're like, why do I have this innate response to react like a kid? And it's like, let's go back and find out what happened between 2 and 9 or 2 and 10 that created this neural pathway, so to speak. And some of it is really positive, like what you shared. So thank you, Mrs. Shear, for helping to shape little Crystal's beautiful mind.
Thank you.
To think outside the box.
And it's funny, what you just said also applies to music, right? So it's funny because we talk about, especially from a marketing lens, right? We talk about what demographic are you? And, are you looking to reach, 25 to 54-year-olds, which, by the way, I'm the first to tell you, I've been in advertising marketing for 17 years. There's a big difference between a 25-year-old and a 54-year-old.
I was going to say, that's a really big Gap.
It's a big demo, and yet it's the most popular demographic to buy is adults 25-54 anyway. But when you're like, who are you catering to? That 18 to 34-year-old, that 25 to 54-year-old, etc. And nobody really talks. Now, granted, when you're talking about online marketing and all that, you can't target children, right? Under 13. And there's plenty of reasons why. And I don't want to open that Pandora's box. I'm not saying we should do that. However, how can you positively impact between those ages that you just talked about? Because if you think about from a music lens, we get so focused on like, oh, I need to resonate with the Gen Z or the millennials because they have the money, or, and hopefully you're not thinking that way. If you're doing music, you're hopefully just focusing on getting the tunes heard, right? But
to be fair, you want to make money in your business. You do have to think about all of it.
Absolutely. But what people lose sight on, and this was kind of an aha moment that I had at a recent show a few months ago, is there were so many kids jumping up and down, just falling in love with this band that was playing. And I sat back and go, and we all know this, right? But we don't maybe actively think about it. What are your most memorable bands, music moments? What they were usually shared experiences with your parents. Yeah. They were usually your earliest memory of your favorite band. You brought up the Beach Boys earlier.
That was your first concert, right?
No, I've never seen the Beach Boys live, but my father's favorite band is the Beach Boys. Okay. Growing up, all I heard was the Beach Boys, and never the Beatles, because even though but it was Beach Boys or Beatles, and my uncle was obsessed with the Beatles, and my dad was obsessed with Beach Boys. But all that said, like, you remember what you grew up with, whether or not it was your choice of what music you were listening to, it sticks with you. But then as you start making your own choices, and it's similar to that age gap, right? Like between, as early as probably 2, 3, 4 years old, all the way until I would venture to say like your teen years, probably the most impressionable age for music too. We're still listening to our favorite bands that we were introduced to as teenagers or younger.
I think hormones has a lot to do with that too.
Not just talking about Pearl Jam.
No, I mean, like when you're going through puberty and then you start to think everything in your whole world is so real and so important. And then you hear this one song that you're like, I just wish he would listen to this song and understand me, right? Then it's like you develop this, again, those same rooted emotions, and people buy because they feel something. And how many friggin' concerts have we been to because we feel something?
Right. But it's so funny because there's so many, memes and whatever about, the person that's still listening to the same music but it's true. We oftentimes wind up, because of that nostalgia that means so much to us, and whatever we made it mean at the time doesn't really go away. Right. So I promise this is not a spoiler. I won't even name the song, but there's a moment in Deadpool and Wolverine, which, by the time this podcast comes out, I'm not sure if everybody will have seen it already, but there are so many call outs to a millennial's heart. There's just so many musical moments that you catch. The whole theater would gasp. And I'm like, this is really beautiful because, it's because this song is playing and because they all for a second just went back to the moment for whatever that meant to them.
It opens with an NSYNC song. Is the funniest shit ever.
It's ridiculous. Well, then, so I'll just go ahead and go one step further. Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. I mean, I equated that to who I thought was the love of my life that I could never have. And how old was I when that came out? But that he was my true love. And Iris was like the song I would play on repeat constantly because that's what we would do to ourselves, right? Let me just listen to the saddest song ever and just wonder why he doesn't want me.
Yep.
So stupid. The power of music. I guess I'll just say that.
Okay, so what was your first concert?
My first concert that I was allowed to go to by myself with a friend of mine, because I was an only child, so my parents were very protective over what I could do without them. My first concert with a friend of mine was Sheryl Crow. Nice.
She just played here in Nashville.
She did. So that's the first one I can remember. But I mean, going with my parents, that I was probably, I can't remember if we did I think Billy Joel. I can remember everything that we would listen to all the time. I don't know that we went to a lot of concerts. We didn't have a ton of money to go out and splurge on concerts at the time until I was a little bit older. But I do remember one of my earliest memories of an event that I went to with them was Gallagher. Not a concert, but a definite experience.
Were you close enough to where you had to put like plastic over you so you didn't get hit with a watermelon? Oh my God. We talk about that? How was that?
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. And then I remember just getting just so infatuated with not Gallagher, but like with the whole storyline because, he has like a brother and there's like a rift. And now I can't remember all the details about it. But I was just so like, well, wait a minute. Did we see the real Gallagher or was it like his brother trying to ride his coattails? Because there was, there were some things going on. It was funny, but
What?
no,
It's like
it was an
St.
incredible
Thomas trying to
experience.
switch places with Jesus on the cross. That's what's going on at the Gallagher concert. That's amazing. I never got a chance to see Gallagher. My mother loved Gallagher. And it's so funny. You would think having an experience like being there and, the plastic tarps and potentially getting fruit thrown at you, like would that translate to television? How theater sometimes doesn't translate to television. And it did. There's something about that weird shit he was doing that just somehow connected through the screen. So, for anyone who has a niche thing, don't take it for granted that people have to be there in person. There's so much that people can access through the internet, through television, because it's the emotion. And also hearing people laugh makes you laugh. Hearing people sing makes you want to sing. Like it's such
that right there in every element of every business, especially in entertainment. But that is the biggest thing I tell artists, especially. Look, there's a lot of unbelievably talented musicians out there and they all deserve to have their music heard if they're extraordinarily, writing ridiculous songs and all that. And yes, it's a very challenging industry. Every industry is challenging. Every industry is hard how do you figure out how to set yourself apart when you're all doing the same thing or have the same product or you figure it out. But what you just said is what I try to drive home it's connection.
Mm-hmm.
If you figure out a way to genuinely connect, so many of us walk into something and we still have a wall up or a barrier or a protective thing, or we just haven't figured out how to connect with somebody yet. The connection to audience will, whether it's on screen or in person or whatever, that is always to me going to be what sets you apart, because I can also point to plenty of artists who might not be as talented as somebody else. But if they have that ability to genuinely connect, it kind of doesn't matter because people are just falling in love with feeling seen, right? I often refer to the two favorite bands that I follow around, that one of them you're very familiar with, but because when you're sitting at those shows, you feel seen. And when I say that, it doesn't mean because the lead singer is staring into your soul, which that also helps, and they do that also. But even when it's no, definitely not mad at it, but you feel seen even when it's not you that they're talking about, right? At every single show, there's a moment where they're acknowledging a fan that wrote a letter or a fan that did that, and even if you're not that person, you're like, oh, they are listening, they are reading the notes, they are paying attention to their fans, and so you're one with the audience and you feel seen. And when you go to a concert where a band's just kind of like the ultimate performer, they're a great performance artist, you can still be entertained, but are you going to go follow them around the country? Are you going to go see them again? If you saw it once, are you like, been there, saw it. Yeah, they were great. It's the connection that keeps you coming back. So I posted something in my stories literally today because Dave Matthews Band is another band that I follow that gets made fun of a lot for better or worse. But
why?
It's just one of those like things that's always been for decades. Like you either love them or you just don't.
I'm lukewarm. Sorry.
That's okay. But
you'll convert me one day.
But I will say what I put in my stories earlier today was a quote from Dave Matthews, which is like, all these years later, you're still selling out these venues and you're still, so successful and whatever. And he goes, we just have the same 35,000 fans. They just follow us everywhere.
It's probably true.
And you know what? He's like, it's so funny because he's exaggerating, but not really. Like
he's funny. He is so funny.
Oh, he's hilarious. And he does these movies for fun. He's worked with your buddy Adam Sandler on several movies that are hilarious.
Oh, his Zohan when he's like in the street gang on the Zohan or whatever.
Oh God, yeah. And my favorite is still Just Go With It because there's a scene in Just Go With It that's just priceless with Nicole Kidman.
That's so funny.
And I love it, but that just goes to show you, even if that were true, and it's again not a far exaggeration. I'm sure there's more than 35,000, but
there's a lot more, yeah.
But there are probably that many that do go to at least I don't know, 3 shows a year, or just multiple shows a year. And that speaks to connection.
Mm-hmm.
He has found a way to connect. And, you could say the same thing about, the Grateful Dead and Bruce Springsteen and, a lot in Pearl Jam, obviously. And a lot of these legacy acts become legacy acts because they've developed a connection that people still want to see them 30 years later.
Yeah, and it's so fun being at the shows when they are calling out a sign that they're reading all the way in the back of the stadium, or telling a story that a fan wrote in and dedicating something to them. And, it does create a connection. It creates a community. And I remember my grandmother used to ask me, like, why do you travel to see Pearl Jam over and over and over? You've already seen them, like you said before. And it's not that every show is different, because that's a obvious thing, because it's live music. It's going to be different. But it is that. It's our friends we've made at the shows. It's the moments that we're going to experience, however close to the stage we can possibly get, because for fuck's sake, we sure try. And, it's a unique experience that cannot be replicated every single time, because we walk away feeling something. And when we're there, we feel it so deeply, so beautifully. Like, Crystal, at any concert of a band that you love, don't you go through almost every emotion that's possible?
Absolutely. And, love her or hate her, and I don't think anybody should hate her at all. Taylor Swift is brilliant, right? Because again, you talk about, first of all, one of the most brilliant business women, that
She's amazing.
Or her team and her, obviously. But, they just had some shows canceled in Vienna not too long ago, and for a horrible, like, potential terror attack, and a terrible situation. And there was this video that came up on TikTok of just thousands and thousands of people lining the street singing her music at the top of their lungs. And it's that same experience that you would have in an arena, right? But this was out just on the street, like, because the shows were canceled. I don't know how they coordinated or whatever, but it goes back to that, like, shared passion. And again, people would not be doing that if they didn't feel seen. And what does Taylor keep doing even all these years later, even though she doesn't have to do these things anymore? But you hear these stories and you're like, oh, no wonder she still has this kind of rabid fan base, because she'll still randomly, like, crash someone's wedding or do, again, things that just like make people feel seen. For us, it's when we hear that, Eddie Vedder, went, what was it? He was in Hawaii and just, like, was randomly in a guitar shop and struck up a conversation with a kid who didn't even know who he was. And he wound up buying him a guitar. And you're like, oh, he's just such a good, and then donating a bunch of other guitars to a bunch of kids in need. But he didn't go and put out, like, a press release. It was just, you're like, oh, this is just something that they're doing out of the goodness of their heart.
Well, that's the beauty of content. And a lot of actors, artists, musicians, they're like, oh, I have to create content. I wish I lived in a world where that wasn't the case. And, hey, as a coach, as a podcaster, as a speaker, I have to create content too. Okay, we all have to do it. It's just part of the business. But the beauty of something like that, like, Eddie didn't create that piece of content, someone else did, but it allows the fans to get to know him a little bit better. And that goes back to, you do have to like and love your people. Not that a musician has to like all of their fans. That's not possible. And that's not exactly what we were talking about earlier. But when we feel like we kind of know them a little bit, like we're on, like, we know a story, or we're in on the inside, that's what I loved about VH1 storytellers. Like, when you know the meaning behind a song, it just creates that connection so much more. And the reason I fell in love with Taylor Swift was not necessarily her music, even though I think she's very talented. It was when I saw her on Jimmy Fallon. She had recently had a medical procedure, and her mom filmed her when she was still, like, high from the anesthesia or something. And she just, like, couldn't figure out how to peel a banana, and just these funny moments. And she allowed it to be on television, and to see her laugh and to see her react and to be vulnerable in front of everyone. And I mean, it couldn't be any more embarrassing coming out of a surgery and being high as hell and slurring your words and not making sense with the things you're asking for. And I fell in love with her. I'm like, she's adorable. She's funny. She's just like me. She's totally dumb after surgery, and I think it's that, right, Crystal? Like, the vulnerability creates connection.
Oh, yeah. And every artist and every content creator genuinely probably hates doing content until you find a way to use it as an expression of your yourself. Like and that means something different for everybody, right? But when you can view it as a creative outlet, when you can view it as a way for your audience to feel seen, when you can find meaning in it, I think the reason why most artists hate content creation is because they don't want to feel like, this is a chore. Like I have to do this thing and I have to act. I have to put on this show. Well, yeah, when it feels like you're putting on a show, that does suck. And then good luck trying to like get motivated to
And the
stare at a
audience will
camera.
feel that feeling too,
And
right?
the audience will feel it too. And we're getting to a point now where, of course, we're generations that have literally been born with like a phone in their hand. So you have to realize that now we're finally for I was going to say for better or worse, but I think it's for better that now we actually crave that genuine. We don't want the scripted. Don't get me wrong. Some scripted stuff is hilarious. Yes. But for the most part, we're entering a stage where people want the genuine, like just be raw, be real, be you. Would rather see that than something that's overproduced, scripted, acted. I would much rather see just the artist out have a day in the life, right? Or something that resonates with that specific artist. A social team that we work with just made the suggestion as they're getting to know this artist that I manage, that they're like, oh, okay, well, this individual is really big on history. And so it's so funny and hopefully he never hears this. But it's so funny because it's like, here's this person that resists social media, like, as much as your husband, if not more.
It's fine. It's totally fair.
Doesn't want to do it, right? And without even having to ask, the second they put a certain idea in there that had to do with music history, I was like, surprise! I get an alert that they posted a reel. I'm like, they posted a reel. They're not even supposed to post that reel yet. And I went and looked, and I was like, oh, it's the one that loves music history. He must have loved that idea because now he could go off on his passion.
There it is.
To weave that in. And it wasn't a chore, and it was genuine, and it was beautiful.
Right. Just do more of what you love. Let it be easy.
Right.
That is so fun. Okay. So mind our music. What does that mean?
Oh, well, ever since it's been pointed out that the acronym is MOM, it means I have kids that I never I never anticipated having. So it is that that company name came to be. It just kind of came to me and felt natural. But the artist driven approach, like we're in this together. It's a journey that it goes back to that Jerry Maguire moment, right? Like it's not my music. It's not your music. It's our music. And that our really encompasses not just, manager and artist, but audience, right? So there was a moment where we were at a venue, and it was the first time this act had played in a venue of this size, right? And their agent was there, and it was a fabulous show. And you're always looking at like, okay, well, what could we do differently? What could we do better? And the performance was stellar. But there was something that was really impactful that their agent Jim said, which was this song was written about this song. Blah, blah, blah. He goes, don't say this song, say our, it was like our song or our music, and he goes, it's just, when you say our, you're involving the audience. And it was a psychological thing, but it's a really, really good point. When you say our versus us or their or mine, right? It's so, I think that subconsciously was what I was thinking when, mind our music, but it was the collective our means a lot.
I love it. Well, then this is our podcast, everybody. And it is, right? I do it for us. We do it for us. And I love the word mind. There's mindfulness in it and intentionality in it. And I remember we talked about that when you started the brand. And, a mind, it's a shared mind. It's a shared mind that you get to bring your magic, your brilliance, your wisdom, your expertise and align with all of theirs, and the reciprocal respect that you and your clients have for one another. It is that beautiful shared mind. So I want to know why music management. And I know that you learned piano and you've always loved music. And we talked a little bit about that. And you got into radio. You went to college for engineering, or like how does this happen? And one sec, the reason I'm asking you is because some people really have a hard time figuring out what is their purpose and what is their passion, because they have either a lot of interests or maybe a niche interest, but how do they turn that into a business, right? So I know it's kind of two questions, but that's what I'm hoping people will take away from this is figuring that little piece out.
Absolutely. So, yes, music has always been ingrained in everything, right? So I was classically trained pianist. I gravitated to the piano from the second my uncle taught me, I don't know, chopsticks or Mary Had a Little Lamb or something at the age of like 4 or something. And so I started taking classical piano lessons. I did not love that. That's a whole nother conversation. So I was forced into classical piano lessons, but I always loved being around music. So, progressing, I was in symphonic band and jazz band. But there was this moment when my parents and I were watching the Grammys, and I forget how old I was. I was probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7. And I said, I want to do that. And they were like, oh, you want to be on stage? And I was like, nope. I go, I want to help people do that. Cause I always had such bad stage fright, which I clearly don't have anymore, but I always had such bad stage fright. I never wanted to be this Leo, never actually wanted to be on stage. I wanted to be side stage helping somebody else's dreams come true. So I always had that clarity that I always wanted to help make that happen. And I always wanted to be around it, right? So then as I started going to concerts as I got older, similarly, I always wanted to be on tour. I still always want to be on tour. I always wanted to be at the shows. I always wanted to be, again, side stage, backstage, some part of making that magic happen. So when I went to college, it was for music business. Florida Atlantic University had just launched a music business program. I was there like the first year they launched it. In that, I realized how much I loved live sound engineering. So I was like, oh, I think I want to be a live sound engineer. Like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the music industry. I knew I didn't want to be the performer. So I was falling in love with the studio. I was doing live sound engineering, audio engineering. But then I started taking some marketing classes and music marketing. Really, I was like, oh, I'm really good at this. So it's so funny to fast forward and be like, I'm doing both. So I always knew, I was live sound engineering, audio engineering, marketing, and then, A&R, which is artist and repertoire. I always wanted to do, A&R. I didn't really know too much about artist management, but I just knew that I wanted to be this like behind the scenes in the industry. So I graduated and I had been trying to intern. I was interning at the Amphitheater in West Palm Beach.
Where you met Steven Tyler.
Where I did meet Steven Tyler. That's a really good story.
That's a fun story.
So I was interning at this amphitheater in West Palm Beach, but it was before Live Nation was Live Nation. So it was still technically Clear Channel Entertainment. So fun story. I was in the room when they were all going back and forth on what the Live Nation logo was going to look like. Aging myself. So I was, interning at like a record label.
That's cool.
Which was awesome. But when it came to putting this into action, like, okay, I have my degree, let me apply to places. There was, unfortunately, and I know that you have some of these stories too, and, as a woman in the industry at the time, and I know this still exists now, but it's gotten hopefully better. But, before the Me Too movement was a thing, I definitely had some Me Too moments, right? So that was it put me in a very cynical place to be like, I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity to get into this industry. So I honestly, for the first 2 years out of college, I went to retail sales management and worked at Macy's. And again, everything happens for a reason, right? Foundational leadership things learned in those 2 years. They had a phenomenal management program at the time. This was when Macy's was still at like their height and retail, looked very different. But I spent 2 years in retail sales management. Did not like that. And it was one day I was encouraged to go apply to my favorite rock station. There was a rock station that's no longer around in Miami.
What was it called?
93 Rock. So I went to go work for 93 Rock, but in advertising and marketing, in sales. And this is coming from a person that always said, my dad was a copier salesman for 35 plus years. I was like, I never want to be in sales. And sales always has this negative connotation. And fast forward, I'm still in sales today, technically, right? So sales always has a negative connotation, but it's not the epiphany that happened when I started working for my favorite rock station that I was listening to 24/7. I quickly realized, oh, this isn't sales. This is going out and just talking about something you're passionate about, right? All of us are in sales. I don't care what industry we're in. Even if you just look at it at a personal level, we are all in sales. We're always selling something. We're selling our belief in something, whether that's whatever, politics, religion. You could bring that into it if you really want to. I'm just saying we're always trying to sell something, our belief in something.
The disconnect is when you're selling something you don't believe in.
Correct, which ties us all the way back to the beginning of If you're getting into it just for the money, then you lose that sense of purpose. Same thing. But we're always selling something. That really helped kind of carve such a path that I didn't realize the impact it would have on my life. But so I started at a rock station when I was
What were you
like
doing?
23 years old. I was selling advertisements on my favorite rock station.
How do you
But
do
again,
that?
oh, you back then, you are literally pretty much like door to door. It's a lot of cold calling and cold emailing, you name it. But you're walking to places that you feel would be a great fit that would appeal to the audience of that radio station. And when you're talking to somebody that was always into rock, it was so funny to be a 20 something year old female walking into these like sports bars and stuff. And they would constantly look at you like, oh, what does this girl know about,
Uh-huh.
my audience? And I'd be like, well, I'm a diehard Dolphins fan. I play video games. I drive a stick shift. I play fantasy football. I would just like run down and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you do know my audience. So, but as a woman, you really had to go out of your way to be
Yeah.
like,
Like, you
listen,
know my audience and you just got hotter. Yes, I'll take this meeting.
yeah, I mean, that worked too. Um, but again, like figuring out how do you resonate, but you know what? It all goes back to connection because
Mhm.
anytime you walked into one of those places, you had to figure out a way to connect and earn the respect of that business owner to be able to earn the conversation to then sell them or convince them on something you were passionate about. So a long story short, wound up apparently being good at that. So I worked for that rock station for a while before it flipped formats. So I've been in radio for 17 years and wound up kind of climbing up the corporate ladder for digital sales management, digital marketing, general sales management, and now a VP of business development. And it gets more and more exciting because then as we weave in all the digital aspects of, the better the data gets, the more intriguing it gets to put together this holistic campaign that far evolves out of radio or audio, right? I could go down a whole rabbit hole there, but
No, it's cool. I mean, I've gone to a lot of marketing seminars, especially in the coaching industry. And when you have the tools, especially now with AI, to be able to know what your audience eats for breakfast and, what kind of car they drive and, what concerts they've been to, it just helps you in so many ways. And I think it's really fun to look at that stuff. And it's fun if
yeah.
you like it. Like you said, you love marketing. I think it's really fun to be like, wow, this can help me actually get to know my audience better and create more connections.
Well, and it's funny because most people will say like, "Oh, I can't stand advertising," and now we're clearly seeing the advertising model is never going to go away. The reason why the Netflixes of the world are evolving and Disney Plus and whatever are evolving into an ad supported format is because it's the only way they can stay in, for better or worse, it's the only way they can really stay afloat. You cannot have a model that's just subscription based. So you do need advertising. However, because I'm the first one too that I'm like, I pay Spotify a premium to not get ads. Like I get it, but the better that the data gets, the more relevant the ads are. If you think about it, you don't mind advertising if it's something that you're genuinely interested in, because how else would you know that that thing exists?
That's true.
It's when you're getting served ads that are completely irrelevant that you're like, well, this is annoying. But if I'm truly getting served, and I always bring it back to like concerts and events, there's nothing that upsets me more than realizing like, oh, I missed so and so in concert last week. Like, why didn't I see that anywhere? That
Mm-hmm.
sucks.
Well, and sometimes, a platform has to get to know you too, so as you spend more time on that platform, the ads will be better suited to you. And, when I emailed out the trailer for the podcast and I said, hey, there's going to be ads on this show, like, this is how I'm making money. This is how I can still put more of these episodes out. So watch them. And you know what? If that ad doesn't feel relevant to you right now, then while it's playing, why don't you think about someone you love and send them a text and say, thinking about you. And so use your ad time to know that you
Right.
are supporting artists and connect with people that you love. So win-win. And I remember picketing during the writer's strike, and there's so much that goes into this, but people started fast forwarding commercials when DVR came out. And then film companies and television companies and brands were like, oh my gosh, panicking. How do we get our ads seen? And so they've had to get really creative. And I think it's cool. And one of my first awards as a producer was Best Branded Content, because we found a way to integrate the advertising in a way that was really funny, and do
Right.
these sponsorships. So anyhow,
And
we're on
oh yeah, and I think I derailed anyway. So that's kind of the one side of my life, right? That's the iHeart side of my life. And then really how did I come to the epiphany? So, the story that I often tell people is the further up the corporate ladder I've climbed, while I love what I do, the further away I would actually get from the music, right? So the
That's a
the
good
93
point.
Rock girl that was running around and just listening constantly to 93 Rock and seeing artists come in and out of the radio station and like some really fun stories. But now, being like corporate, right? And 100% remote and, still have the ability to come up with some really cool concepts that tie in artists and podcast hosts and influencers and all things that we have that we're able to do, and the iHeartRadio Music Festival and whatnot, all great things. But I got further and further away from the artists themselves. So knowing that I always also had this passion where really I was constantly, ever since I was in college, right, I was supporting some of our friends that were musicians, right, in
Mhm.
helping them along the way, because naturally 90% more of creatives, their mind's wired a certain way for a reason. And it's a lot harder for them. Their zone of genius is not going to be in business, right? And at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it is a music business. So how many times do they spend all their life savings creating this beautiful music, but then without understanding the business side, they would just release it and like, if you build it, they will come. But if there were no marketing dollars put behind that to get it heard, if there was no website, if there was no, I mean, you name it, then you're really doing yourself a disservice and you potentially, it's a wasted investment. So I was always really passionate about, like, again, going back to coaching people, how can I help coach these people to understand they're running a business,
Yeah,
even
help
though
them
that
be seen.
help them be seen. Yeah, the end of 2019, I had a little bit of an awakening, and tying it all full circle to the very beginning, but somebody came back into my life that was doing what I wanted to do. And through those conversations, I started seeing like, oh, you know what? This person's not just, it was like a mirror, right? It was, oh, this person's doing what I've always wanted to do. But then I would see little things where, and it's going to sound uglier than I intended, but I would see little things where I was like, oh God, if I were doing that, I would do it differently and better in some cases, right? And so I started seeing and building my own confidence of, because there were the days where I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, right? That's so easy to
Mhm.
say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I can never do something like that. And I lived in that place of fear and upper limiting and you name it for a while. And it wasn't until I was having a conversation with your husband that the first time that I truly felt like, and that's not true. I think it was because I was ready to hear it. But the first time that I truly was ready to hear it and felt seen for validation, if you will, on like, oh, this person believes I actually can do it, was
Mhm.
because your husband said, well, why don't you just manage me? And I was like, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a manager. He was like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. And he's been with some pretty big managers, so he absolutely saw that.
And so that really was the launching point for Mind Our Music. I got my LLC in January of 2020. Great timing. We put out your husband's first single in March of 2020. Also great timing. And it was fun to have a single or an album release party on March 7th of 2020 when the world shut down the week later. And even at that show was the most awkward, like, should I be here? Are we all going to be trapped in LA? Do I get
Right.
on
I
a
know
plane? What am I
everyone at
doing?
the show is like, should we be standing apart? Are we all going to die? It's fine, right? And I'm like, you know what? We're going to die doing what we love. It's great.
It'll be great.
I went to
Um,
Disneyland twice that week just in case like the world was ending, and I'm
oh
so glad
yeah.
I did. Hmm.
And you know what? It's the silver lining in all of that is I tell people all the time not to diminish or discredit, COVID and all of it, but the silver lining in all of it was all of a sudden with the lockdowns and everything, I had so much free time because of the lockdown. It was like
Yeah.
all of a sudden nights and weekends, I was so invested in, because I'm one of those like, oh, if I'm going to do something, I want to be the expert in it. And so I
Hmm.
probably learned more in that year or two that we were mostly shut down, right? Like I learned more in that year or two that would have probably taken me 5+ years to learn
Yeah.
and to navigate in a place where live music couldn't even be a thing. So it's like, oh, also let me help these artists monetize live streams and figure out ways to be successful when you can't get out there and play your music live.
Yeah. Well, there's blessings in all of it. And I remember you weren't with iHeart, you were with a different company that you're not with anymore. And it was 2018, and we had tickets to see Pearl Jam in Seattle, which was a bucket list trip for both of us because it's Pearl Jam's hometown. And you had messaged me and you were like, I'm going to miss night one because they had scheduled a meeting that you had to present at. And you were heartbroken and I was heartbroken. And I remember, I think I was a little pissed, right? And
You and me both.
but I said to you, I feel like if you don't remember it this way, I mean, I do. It was like a pivotal moment in changing what your life is now, because I said, "Hey, Crystal, you have this big corporate job and you make great money so that you can do what you love in life, right? You said earlier, money doesn't buy happiness, but it sure helps, right? And now you don't get to do the thing you want to do because of your job. And it's such a bratty thing for me to even say and think, because we have jobs and sometimes we miss shit, and that's just how it is, right? But I just remember feeling so heartbroken for you.
Yeah, full context being I had put my vacation request in January. This event was in August. I had outlined in January, like, this is what I'm doing. And still somehow the weeks before I was told, nope, you can't take that vacation. I was like, I've already spent thousands of dollars between the tickets, the airfare, and the hotels. What do you mean no?
100%. And also, like, not to sound like a total brat about it, in that previous role, you were unhappy and you were stressed a lot. And, like you said, it was before 2019 when you started working with your life coach. And I saw what was going on with you that a lot of people deal with in corporate lifestyle. There's an epidemic of anxiety and depression and all the things that happen when we are facing burnout. And to know that you were working so hard, and how you were feeling, and then you didn't get this little cherry on top, I was like, fuck those motherfuckers. I want you to quit your job. You're like, I can't just quit my job, but I will see you on night 2. I'm like, okay.
And I will tell you the lesson in that, because you're right. So many people get to a point of, because you operate out of fear too, right? Oh, I can't lose this job. I can't lose this paycheck. I can't look bad for such and such. And, this is going to sound incredibly cocky, but we put ourselves in situations sometimes when the reality is the only reason that I had to be in that room was because I was the only person that could present at that level it was this big budget meeting. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate thing in that is, with the right leader, they would have been able to pick that. They wouldn't have questioned me taking vacation. They would have figured it out and been able to represent my part. Because when I'm telling you, it was like 10 minutes of a 2-hour presentation. They couldn't figure out how to represent my part of 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And more importantly than that, it's that this was the most passionate thing that I do and the thing that I love most. And, this is not meant to sound anything. I don't have kids, and I had used that as an example of, like, I don't think you would ask me to skip my kids, traveling soccer tournament. Mm-hmm. You're only asking me to skip this because it's a concert.
Correct.
And, I'm not trying to make a comparison, but at the same time, like, that's not really fair to not see your employee in that way and realize this thing that means the most to them. Mm-hmm. You're casting it aside and saying that I have no choice but to skip that thing because of something that you could have easily found a solution for. So again, something that I always keep in mind if in my leadership positions in, how you see and recognize people. And yes, there will always be sacrifices, and there would definitely be things that are out of our control.
Oh, yeah. But Kalen missed his father's 50th birthday because of the MTV Unplugged thing he was doing with Korn. And, his dad understood, but it still broke his heart a little bit, even though he was really happy to go and do that job. It happens.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens. But in this case, it was truly do I really need to be there though? Part of me was the flattered, the flattery and like, okay, well, I guess I'm the best person to present this. And, and I was given a lot of kudos and things that meant a lot to me at the time, but still broke my heart that I had to skip something so incredible when it had been planned out for so long anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a lot of corporate clients, and they bring me in for mindfulness coaching and consulting because of that, right? Because when your employees feel respected and heard, and then the culture is deepened because everyone feels valued, the company makes more money, people are taking less sick days because they're not burning out, anxiety is down, and you could do more fun, like leadership activities because people are actually happy to work and all that stuff. So it's a domino effect. And I think, sadly that mark was missed and they lost a great leader. And you know what? Good for iHeart.
True. But,
Yeah.
and you know what, I will tell you one thing on that, because I mean, I still would have had the same reaction, I think, because of course, at the end of the day, it was Pearl Jam in Seattle and that was bucket list and all the things. But had that not already been something in a string of other situations, it probably, if it would not have been as big of a deal if it was if I was feeling appreciated, if I was feeling seen, if I was feeling treated, then honestly, yeah, it would have stung, but I would have been like, Elysia, I have to do this because I have to do this for my leader, and this is really important to them. And I would have bit the bullet and not been so hurt by it. But this was just one of many situations of feeling like, oh, I'm working the hardest, getting paid. There was a wage gap issue too. I'm working the hardest, making not enough money for what I'm doing, consistently being told that I'm the best at what I do, but constantly being underappreciated. And so the lesson in all of that, because we will often get to a point in our lives at some point, which again serves its purpose, because oftentimes, you hear, if you don't, I don't want anybody to ever hit rock bottom, but that there is truth in, like, sometimes you have to hit the bottom to recognize what's on the other side. And you have to go through those challenges to understand, like, oh, I deserve a lot better than this. Like, and to get the motivation to say, okay, no, I'm ready to make the choice to be happy.
Yeah. And so that's what it takes. And good, right? Kudos to you. And, that's not why you quit. You didn't even wind up leaving for another year or two after that anyway. So you still stuck it out, and that's who you are. You're loyal, and your clients are so lucky to have that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to just touch a little bit on niching down, right? As an artist. And for anyone who is listening, if you're not a musician, you're not necessarily creative, but let's say you're a coach or, you're a teacher, and it's like, I have this conversation with my clients all the time of like, well, if I niche down, I don't want to exclude anybody, right? What would you say about that?
I think catering to an audience, I mean, even coming from a business, marketing standpoint, it goes back to connecting and being seen. And so it's knowing your audience is huge, and knowing who you are is huge. And when your audience, no matter how niche they are, sees that you know who they are and appreciate them and see them, that quite honestly, it doesn't matter if you're playing arenas or playing small clubs. You're changing lives. And I think that, I guess that would be my answer to anybody that's like, oh, well, they're too niche. And it's like, well, how dare you? Because they're for somebody, and they're changing lives, in that aspect of people want to feel seen. And so when you figure out your niche, if anything, quite frankly, those are the people that know their craft the most.
I went to a Dresden Dolls concert for the first time, because our friend Brian is the drummer, and I worked with Amanda and Brian on a project. So I go to the concert and I'm like, okay, Dresden Dolls, cool. I've heard their music. They're amazing. Brian's one of my close friends. The level of dedication that these fans have to see punk rock cabaret. Everybody is dressed up. Everybody has makeup on, just like Amanda and Brian. Everybody is like wearing what you would wear if you went to a circus in the 1910s or something like that. Like, it was amazing. And I'm like, you know what? You can niche down as niche as you want to niche. Some people say niche. What do you say? I say niche.
I say niche.
Right. Niche down as niche as you want to niche. Weird Al. So let's broaden the strokes. Okay. So whatever you do for a living, whoever who's watching or listening, you do your one thing. So he's a musician. Okay, cool. He plays polka music. Well, that's interesting, right? Really niching down here. He plays accordion polka music. Wow, that's a really small niche. He plays polka accordion parody music, right? Like, on paper, that should not have worked.
Right.
but nobody was doing that. And
Right.
I don't even know if we knew we wanted it, but we want it.
A conversation that came up the other day, which I kind of love, that kind of weaves into this too, is, we're forever, when you're submitting or pitching an artist, you're talking about like, well, who are they a similar, who's a similar artist, or what genre do they fall into? And I understand that. But in having a conversation specifically about Reigns, that's constantly, oh, well, they fall into the Mumford and Sons lane, but they're not. And but they're Noah Kahan, but they're not. But they're the 1975, but they're not. And there's comparisons are great, but it's so critical to. I think I said the other day. I said, you know what I'm going to start saying when somebody say, well, what does Rain sound like? I'm like, well, Rain sounds like Reigns, which is why you need to listen to them.
That's a great answer. They're amazing. Right? Yeah.
So because we fall into this trap of like, just, oh, okay, well, what bucket do they fall in? Well, you know what? They're squarely in their own lane. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the strength is in, and I definitely, I wouldn't say that they're niche, but the strength is in finding and owning and dominating your lane and figuring out what makes you different from everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they're fantastic. All the links to Crystal's artists are going to be in the description here. And of course, you can find them on mindourmusic.com as well. So I think that really helps, and it goes kind of ties everything we've talked about today together, that when you know what you love and you follow that love, even if it's little pieces like your story of just like, well, I don't know what A to Z looks like, but I'll just go A to B and then B to C. And then, oh shit, now we're back to A and da-da-da. And then you navigate away. Your life shows up for you, as long as you are willing to work through whatever seems like a failure or a frustration, and to acknowledge the wins, and to keep, going, okay, I am good at this, right? Like, good. Please acknowledge where you're good at something, because then, like you said, oh, I am good at sales. That's interesting, right? I never thought I would do sales. So I love the way you framed it too. Like, when we do that, our life shows up and we could do whatever we want. And I wish that for everybody.
And follow your gut, because I can't tell you how many times, and this is definitely something you learn in sales too, with cold calling, of just like, yeah, just reach out, just, or chase the nose. And one of the most uncomfortable things, right? To just reach out to strangers and be like, hi. And the fear of not getting an answer, or the fear of rejection. So easy to fall into that trap. And that applies to everything in life. But for the most part, what have you got to lose? Because when you're reaching out to strangers, it's like, okay, they don't get back to you. They don't get back to you. And it's, so long as you're not putting something like ridiculously, offensive in that email, there's nothing that's going to come back on you. Right. And the worst that can happen if you're asking for something is they say no. You're in no different position than you currently are. But by not taking the chance, you risk it all. And so I say that because there have been so many times, and in the last few months especially, and knock on wood, hopefully this trend continues, but I'll just get a hit. And my gut will be like, take the moonshot. You know what? What's the chance that this person is actually going to respond? And I reached out to, every day I'm reaching out to some celebrity's manager or whatever. And there's plenty of times where I'm like, they're probably not going to get back to me. And every single time in the last few months, I've gotten a response. It might not be the like, oh, we're going to help you right the second, or it might not be exactly what my end goal is yet, but they're reading it, they're responding to it, and it's planting the seeds, right? So take the moonshots, because I used to be that person that was like, I don't know if I could reach out, from a business perspective, I was always like, oh, the owner, the CEO, no, I'll just reach out to the marketing person. No, man, reach out to the owner, reach out to the CEO. So same thing. I like reach out to, from an artist management perspective, it's like, okay, you know what? Why not? Why not reach out to the A-list artist and their management team? Why not reach out to the owner of the record label, or the major that everybody says that this artist isn't ready for? Okay, what's the worst that can happen? You don't get a reply, you get a no, or you get a not yet. But the best that can happen is you get a response, you get a yes, or you're getting in my case, you're getting your name and your artist name in front of the people that it's branding.
Right.
It might not be branding from a marketing sense, but it's branding from a, you know what, they get enough emails with that artist's name in it, eventually they're going to be like, oh, I've heard of them.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's staying on top of mind with people. And when I was acting full time, I sent my acting manager a coffee cup with my face on it. And she told me this was really smart, but she was confused in the beginning. I said, hey, Marissa, don't take this coffee cup home. I want you to leave it at work, and I want you to leave it on your desk, and I want you to put your pens in it. And she's like, why? I go, because I want you to see my face every single day, so that as you're looking through breakdowns for film and TV, you think of me to submit me. And she was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Right. So whatever way, without being annoying, you know, to just stay on top of mind. And I love the idea of just take the moonshot. And I needed to hear that today too, Crystal, because, you know, I'm friends with a lot of celebrities, and you even mentioned one of them today. And I haven't reached out to him about this show. And there's maybe a few that I have that are like, okay, we'll do it before the end of the year. But I think about even authors I love, like Gay Hendricks, you know, who wrote The Big Leap, and he has a new book out right now. And I'm like, I want Gay to be on my show. There's so many people that I want on this show. And sometimes even I have that little upper limit moment where I'm like, but will they? But I won't know unless I ask them. You know, I don't. And then I start to think, oh, well, what do I need to have put together? Okay, well, we're recording this before this has launched, right? So I'm like, oh, it needs to be out. They need to see that there's views. They need to see the press release. They're not going to look at any of that shit. They don't have time. They're going to say yes or no because something inside them resonates with it, and they have a gut feeling to move forward or to move away, right?
Literally yesterday, the publicist that we work with was having a hard time breaking through to, and it's a team effort, right? Like, you don't want to just be like, oh, the publicist isn't, no, she's great, but she's hitting a wall. And I was like, you know what, and I happened to see the name of a person who wrote a very great write-up the other day of another friend of mine that's an artist. It's a small world thing, but an artist that a late manager friend of mine manages had a release yesterday, had a great write-up in People magazine. And I'll just put this out now, and maybe I'll manifest it, and who knows what we'll be talking about later. But I was like, well, you know what? This person that wrote this article in People, okay, well, the publicist is having a hard time reaching out to her via email, et cetera. And I was like, you know what? Let me just find her on Instagram. I DM'd her on Instagram. I was like, I'm going to sneak into the DMs. She's got a private account. She's probably not even going to see this message, but what have I got to lose, right?
Take the moonshot. Mm-hmm.
Take the moonshot. So I reach out to this journalist, and as I look her up on Instagram, because don't forget the power of, I think we all default to like LinkedIn, and don't forget the power of social media, that sometimes just sliding into a DM is a great thing. Mm-hmm. Because we get a million emails, and you said before, stay top of mind, and you want to break through the clutter, and we're bombarded with messages from everywhere all the way. Just try different approaches. So I reach out, I sent a long note. Within seconds, I get a reply. I'm
nice.
Like, oh, okay. Within seconds, I get a reply. But what I noticed when I looked at her Instagram, I'm like, oh, we've got 4 mutual connections. Like, she actually might see this message and reply because we've got 4 industry mutual friends. So she accepted my request or whatever. Anyway, got the email today that she submitted the story for consideration to People, because they're all freelance writers, right? So fingers crossed that the editor accepts it. But I guess I say that to say, like, there was once a time where I would have just upper limited and just like, oh, okay, well, we'll just, or just be like, oh, yeah, the publicist has got it, and you know, she'll break through. And so there's multiple lessons in that, like, build the right team so that you build the trust and vulnerability that we can have open dialogue, and like, oh yeah, Melissa, you want me to jump in too? Like, let's tag team this. And because at the end of the day, we both have the same goal in mind, right?
And you're so good at this shit, Crystal.
Thanks. But it felt really, really good to just get that like immediate, oh, okay. So here's someone that sent probably 3-4 emails that were getting no responses. I send one DM and get a response in 2 seconds. I'm not better than the publicist. It's just we're constantly bombarded with messages. So it's timing, it's persistence, it's different approaches. But what you were saying, it's storytelling. Because the other thing was, I'm going to have, until the publicist gets to know all of us a little bit better, because we just started working with her and she's fabulous. But I've been working with these guys now for 6 months. My storytelling and my emotion is going to shine through a little bit more right now. because I can speak to so many things. So, the story that I told in this that I think tugged at her heartstrings, and it's about knowing who you're reaching out to. There's a lot of lessons in this. I glanced at her profile on People. I saw that she has a love for, love stories and country music and this, that, and the other. And I could just tell, again, you kind of get that gut. And I was like, oh, I need a lead from the heart with this one. This isn't just going to be like touting their number of streams and publisher and whatever. This is like, oh, let me tug at the heartstrings for a second. So I'll tell this story here because why not? One of the many things that made me fall in love with Reigns beyond their musical talent is we were in Arizona, and it was the first time that we were playing in some pretty big venues, and we were walking into the mall. We were doing something before the show. It was like 100 degrees out in Phoenix, and
that's it. It was only 100.
Who knows? Well, it was early. It was early in the year. It wasn't, it wasn't the oven yet. So we're like walking to the mall or something, and Mark, the lead singer, goes, "Oh, Crystal, did I ever tell you about this?" And he starts pointing to his arm, and I'm like, "No." And it's the one tattoo he has, and it's just 2 letters and 4 numbers. I don't know if I ever even noticed it before. And he goes, "Did I ever tell you about this?" I was like, "No." He goes, "Well, it's the only tattoo I have, but it's the flight number and he didn't even have to finish his sentence. And I was like tearing up. I'm like, "Stop it." He goes, "It's the flight number from when I first left the UK to meet the boys in LA, and our lives all changed." I'm like, oh, come on, right? So I led with that. I was like, here's a guy who had never even been to America, who had never met these 2 boys from North Dakota, who goes and gets on, literally within days of reaching out blindly on social media, gets on a plane to meet 2 strangers. And within a few days in LA, because the boys from North Dakota had moved to LA at this point, within a few days decided, yep, I'm just going to pick up my life, leave university in the UK, move to the States to join a band that has no track record. It's not like they were already playing in arenas or something. It was like, nope, we're just going to do this together and build it. And he's so dedicated to like this is forever.
Yeah.
That he had the flight number tattooed on his arm of the day that changed his life, all of their lives. And so I led with that story. And so I'm like, you know what? Maybe she just needed a different story.
Yeah, well, she needed to hear a story. She's a storyteller. So you connect with someone where you're excited about this. So you want to share it with her.
Right. And so that goes back to what you were just saying about sometimes we overthink, and I'm definitely the overthinker. I can't tell you, especially in the beginning when and I'm trying to get better at it because I definitely fall in this mindset sometimes. But it's like, oh, everything has to be perfect. This email has to be perfect, and the stats have to be updated, and the one sheet and the media kit has to be absolutely flawless. No, you've got most of the time.
I would fail if that was the truth about life.
You've got like 5 seconds to capture somebody's attention, which is true in every sense, by the way. Any social media thing you post, any video that you post, you have like the first 5 seconds. There's a reason why YouTube TrueView, right? Like you can skip the ad after 6 seconds. If you don't capture somebody in that first 6 seconds, you're done, which is kind of sad that that's where we're at. But same thing with when you're reaching out to somebody, you have to know how to talk to that person and capture their attention, because the likelihood that they're going to read your stat sheet or even open an attachment, or God forbid your email's a page long. I used to make that mistake for most of my career, right? Mm-hmm. You have 6 seconds to capture their attention with something that's going to make them want to keep reading.
So do you have any tips for people who are starting their entrepreneurial career, or, that are scared of marketing? How do you know what to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest part, and it's the part that still gives me anxiety sometimes, right? But it's kind of a little bit of what I said before. It's you have nothing to lose. You have more to lose by not taking action. Mm-hmm. So instead of the analysis paralysis or the fear guiding you, it's no, go out, find the contact information, or ask friends for contacts and reach out. And don't overthink it. There's so many people that will read their email 15 times before hitting send because they're overthinking what they're saying. If you're speaking from the heart and somewhere genuine, and I will say at the same time, remember what I said, capture their attention in the first 6 seconds, like definitely just try to not overthink it and in turn wind up, you don't want to send a diary, right? Like a 2-page thing that nobody will read. But at the same time, just reach out. I will say, in the spirit of not overthinking it, even if you make some mistakes in the beginning where you're not capturing them with the best subject line, or you are sending a 2-page email, that's still better to me than not taking action at all. Once you see what's working, it just flows, right? It's getting to that point, but I mean, there's truth in saying like chase the nose.
Mm-hmm.
100, you could get 100 no's, but guess what? That when you get that one yes, it could be the yes that changes your life. So, but if you're not taking any action at all, how do you make a change? That's probably the biggest piece of advice is just take the action.
Andrea says, if you get a no doesn't mean you're not going to do it. A no just means you're not going to do it with them. Right. I'm paraphrasing. That's what she says all the time. And it's such a great reminder. Okay, love, we're just about out of time. So again, for everybody listening and watching, please go to the links below to see all of Crystal's bands. I went to Mind Our Music, and you have this beautiful quote, and it might be on your Instagram too, because it's under your picture, but it says, I am integrity. I am passion. If you work hard and you're kind, anything can happen. I love that.
That is, believe it or not, a Conan O'Brien quote.
Hell yeah.
Not the I ams, but the if you work hard and you're kind, anything can happen. And that was, I believe he said that on his last filming of The Tonight Show with everything that was going on at the time. And there was this whole like, I'm with Coco movement. And the beauty in that is, he got to, while it was a shorter period of time than what he would have liked, he got to live out his dream, right? He always dreamed of hosting The Tonight Show. And for him to be faced with this thing where people could have been really angry about that, right? And could have held such a distaste for whatever the situation. And he instead really like signed off with, I promise you, if you work hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen. And guess what? It did, right? I think however many months later, he wound up on TBS, and now he has the I'm with Coco podcast, and Conan O'Brien's still doing fabulous. And I love that man. I think you ran into him at some point and you have a great story with Conan, but I want him to be on your podcast.
I would love, yes, Conan O'Brien, come be on my podcast. I have this weird thing with redheads where I have these like awkward crushes on redheads. Like in high school, I had a crush on Seth Green, who I'm now friends with, which is so awkward. Hi, Seth. I had a crush on you in high school. Probably still do. His wife is amazing. And Conan O'Brien was one of my first redhead crushes. I'm like, what is going on with me and these redheads? And I was telling Kaylin last night that I have such a crush on Sam Reed, who plays Lestat in the new Interview with the Vampire series. I'm like, what is it with me and these friggin' redheads? Okay, anyhow, I digress. Okay, babe, last question before I let you go. Let's say you strike it rich. You play Powerball or Mega Millions, and it might be like $1 billion, hundreds of millions of dollars. The idea of making money is no longer a concern, even though I know you love what you do. So I want to know, when you hit it rich and you find out you've now got hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, what is the first thing that you do when you find out that you won? And because even by visualizing it, it helps to manifest it. And what do you do with your time now that you don't have to think about money?
Oh man. I mean, there's definitely a few things that would change, but okay. What is the first thing I would do when I found out? I don't know if I would tell anybody. You hear all of those like horror stories of when like family and friends find out that you won the lottery, and it's, God, there's some really terrible stories out there. I'd like to think that we've really, as far as our friend group, that we've really created a tribe of people that we've all been through everything and anything together. So part of me is like, I could probably tell that group, and we'll all just like, I'll just invest in the commune that we'll all be living in at some point.
I'm going to call my uncle, so I hope you also call my uncle.
Oh, I should probably do that. I would no, but yeah. So seriously, I would first and foremost, before telling anybody, I would definitely be calling some sort of financial advisor, a lawyer for sure. That's just looking out for all sorts of things. But I mean, it's one of those like, I might not tell anybody, but there would be signs.
Like those memes of people that are just covered in dogs, right?
Yeah, I mean, but for me, like there would be signs would be like, I don't know how much different it would be from the way that you and I already live. Be like, oh, are Elysia and Crystal going to even more Pearl Jam shows? I don't know that our friends would even notice that because they already think we're insane. So like for us, it'd be like, yeah, we're hitting every single city on the tour in every country. But to them, they probably already think that we do that.
Well, now we can get the most expensive plastic bubble for when I bring you to Australia and New Zealand that the insects will not penetrate.
Right. I mean, exactly. There are the signs that we would absolutely be at the most luxurious hotels. We would be at the spa before the show.
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to be, sorry, friends in Pearl Jam communities, we're not going to be the campers. We'll be too busy in our spa, massage and sauna and hot tub.
We'll just pay for the ridiculously stupid expensive tickets on the side stage. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. But no, I mean, truthfully though, I'd invest in the things I believe in. And yes, the boring things, if we want to talk about like, okay, I would do the smart financial things and would I invest in more, real estate or whatever? I mean,
Yeah.
my mind goes immediately to, I would invest in the artists that I believe in. I would still be doing what I do as far as managing and developing people because that's my purpose.
Yeah. I could also see you creating a music festival like Ohana.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if we're going to go down that path, I mean, there's a lot. So if I go back to the very beginning, I had visions of owning a record label, a recording studio. This one's a funny one. A live recording studio that would have almost like just a wall of soundproof glass, of being able to be in a cafe or bar or whatnot. Definitely something where you could go and experience a live album being created, but you're also having a social outing. So you can be part of this experience. And then as soon as the show's over, you can buy the vinyl right away. So I was going to say, you know what, like Third Man Records kind of does that, right? With the Blue Room where it's taped straight to vinyl.
That's cool.
So there's definitely some cool stuff happening with that. I would probably either invest in or build that and take it to the next level.
Yeah. Well, and to what we talked about earlier, you're going to create something that hasn't totally been created yet because that's who you are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That is who I am.
Okay. So when my guests are on, I always donate to a charity in their name. So what is your charity of choice?
I think it would have to be EB Research Partnership. So, and I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. I've done a lot with that charity. I just did a birthday fundraiser for EB Research Partnership. So that is for the butterfly children. They're called the butterfly children because it is a terrible terminal skin disease where the average life expectancy is between 13 and 30. And, they lack the gene to pretty much hold their skin together. And that's the largest organ in the body. So it's a terrible, terrible, painful disease. But this foundation does an incredible job with raising the funds to now they finally have treatment options that are FDA approved and hopefully getting closer and closer to a cure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, darling. I will be happy to donate once again to EB, which I am also a huge, huge advocate for. So thank you for today. Thank you for shining your light. And I encourage everybody listening and watching to check out Mind Our Music, to connect with Crystal on LinkedIn. She's such a powerful mentor and creative, and check out her bands. And whoever's listening and watching, if you have connections to anyone to support these artists in the industry, Crystal is a connector. And she loves meeting new people, as you could have imagined at this point. So introductions are always welcome, and let's, encourage artists supporting artists. There's enough competition in the world to blind us. So let's shine light instead.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome, darling. Have a beautiful day.
You too.